I began shooting professionally in around 2005. And the question that was asked then was RAW versus JPEG. The question is still being asked, what do I shoot? Do I shoot in RAW? Do I shoot in JPEG? A RAW file is an unprocessed, that's why it's called RAW. It's raw, like something that's raw. It hasn't been processed in any way. It's all the information. You take a picture, the shutter opens, the sensor absorbs loads and loads and loads of information. Can come to something like 30 megabytes of information in a camera like this, in a professional camera. A JPEG, on the other hand, is a processed image. I wouldn't say it's compressed, although it is kind of compressed, but it's processed, which means all the information that was taken in the RAW, the camera lets go of a huge amount of that information. For example, a regular RAW image, like I just said, is around 30 megabytes. A regular JPEG image on my camera, the way I shoot, is around 3.5 megabytes, which means it dropped 26.5 megabytes of information. So is a RAW image better than a JPEG image? Well, for sure, because a RAW image, you can pull a JPEG from a RAW, but you can't pull a RAW from a JPEG. So is it better or worse? RAW is better. The question is, it costs you to shoot RAW. It costs you an extra 26.5 megabytes on average per image. Is that a worthwhile price for the benefits of what RAW provides for you? So let's look. I'm going to show you a couple of images here. So the first images that I'm going to show you are the stereotypical images that you're going to see all over the internet when you ask the question, should I shoot RAW or JPEG? What do I mean by stereotypical image? This image is what's called of a very high dynamic range. That means it has dark shadows and it has very high highlights, very light highlights. Now, we've lost the information. This is the JPEG, this is the RAW. They look very similar at this point. However, watch what we can do with the RAW. If we drop the exposure and drop some highlights as well. Now we open up the shadows, so we can see already we brought back a lot of sky. Now we can open up the shadows, that's opening up that bush at the bottom. Drop the whites, brings back the sky a little bit more, also brings back some detail in that building on the right side. And now we can open up the black to give us a little bit more detail in the shadows. We've ended up with a very acceptable image. We've got good colour in the sky, we've got good detail in the shadows. That's great. Let's see now what we can do with the JPEG. Now, as I drop the exposure on the JPEG, we can immediately see that the sky is starting to already look actually quite disgusting. Let's drop the highlights further to see what we can do with the sky. We've got already like kind of dirty greens and turquoises. We see banding. It's not looking so good. Let's open up the shadows, see if we can bring back the tree there, which we can do. That's fine. That's not so bad. Okay. In regards to the whites, if we drop the whites further, we don't bring back any information in the building here on the right side, and the sky is a disaster. Now let's have a look at these two images together, next to each other. This was our RAW picture, and this is our JPEG picture, and we can see clearly that the RAW one, hands down, it's not comparable how good a RAW is compared to a JPEG. Okay, I want to mention something else as well in regards to the white balance. Now when we shoot in RAW, we can see, this is my RAW image here. If I go to white balance, I'm afforded all of the options that I have in my camera: auto, daylight, cloudy, shade, etc. I can basically forget about white balance in camera, and I can choose my white balance in post, making things much easier, so to speak, if you would think. Making things much easier. It takes away another thing that I need to think about when I'm shooting. When I look at my JPEG image, I go to my white balance and I have only 3 options: as was shot, auto, or custom. And let's just look at the leeway that I'm afforded here. As I drop down, we can see that the quality of the image actually degrades quite dramatically in the JPEG image. Whereas when I go to my RAW image and I mess with my white balance, I've got a lot more options, I also want to add that I saw a survey from the ISPWP, the International Society for Professional Wedding Photographers, and in the survey they ran, 90% of the photographers said that they shoot in RAW, exclusively in RAW. Only 4% said they shoot exclusively in JPEG, okay? I'd imagine the others were some kind of mixture. So with all that said, yeah, I shoot in JPEG. Why? What are the benefits of JPEG? So there's a few benefits. I'm going to go in order. Okay, number one, for me, what I feel is the most obvious benefit is for my backup system that I use. My camera takes two cards. It has an SD card and it has a CF card. Now my CF card is what I call my job card. Every job that I shoot, I blank my CF card and I start again. Okay, the SD card, which in this case is 64 megabytes, I have two kinds, 64 and 128, that just sits in my camera for sometimes up to 2-3 months even. And I just keep adding to that card every job. So when I look through that card, it will go back sometimes 2-3 months ago and can have up to 20,000 images on that card. Okay, I keep blanking this card and reusing it. That means every 3 months when my SD card fills up, I take it out of my camera, I have a little place on my wall in my office, I stick it on the wall with a little note from when it began till the last picture was taken, what dates, and then I take the old one, which is probably now 3 months old, which for sure all the pictures are now on the cloud and on my hard drives and by the clients already. I put that card back in my camera, I blank it and I start again, which means I've got a constant backup of all the pictures that I'm taking. I'm shooting again, I've got 2 card slots, so that makes a difference for me. I found that the most likely place where people lose pictures as professional photographers is not in regards to hardware failure. That does happen, but it's very rare, especially nowadays it's very rare. Where people lose images is always in regards to the transfer, or people forgot to transfer the files, they came back in the middle of a job and they had another job and they blanked the card and they forgot, etc., etc. So this really puts an end to all of those problems. There have been not many times, but a few times where I had to go back to my raw, so to speak, my archive, my SD archive on my wall, and pull back pictures that I had lost some ways. That wouldn't happen if I was shooting in RAW, because I wouldn't be able to have a card big enough to support all the pictures. Number one. Number two is that I use flash a lot. Now that's something that you're not going to be doing right now, but we can see here in these images, this is an image that is shot without flash. Now, to have all of the detail in the background, all of the colour in the background, we can see that my subjects are grossly underexposed. Now, when I throw a flash in here, we can see that my subjects now are correctly exposed and we have all that detail in the background, which is another reason that I can get away without shooting RAW. In regards to just simple storage on my computer, number three, the storage is, I'm able to get away with a 2 terabyte drive per year, as opposed to if I was shooting RAW and backing up RAW, it would be, I mean, you wouldn't really be able to back that up. It wouldn't make sense. And then you'd have to convert everything, which takes not a huge amount of time, but it takes time in regards to converting everything back to JPEG. The RAW images need more processing. From camera, they need sharpening, they need vibrance, saturation, contrast, all of these things added. That means that costs more time as well. Another very important point is the buffer. Now what that means is when I'm shooting in JPEG, which I am, I'm never going to be taking that many pictures. I can just keep shooting and my camera will be able to keep up with me and I will be able to preview the images as they're being taken. If I'm shooting in RAW, now my camera ceased up. Now this is precious time. My camera's still thinking. Now the picture comes up. Okay, now it's caught up with itself. It doesn't sound like, it doesn't really, it only took a few seconds, but when you're on location and you're shooting, that can really make a difference. There'll be many times where I will shoot burst more than my camera can handle in RAW. Okay, also a very important point in this camera is that I have this button at the top here, which is a programmable button that I've programmed that when I touch the button, it turns my camera into RAW, and when I touch it again, it takes it out of RAW. So in a situation where I feel that I would be able to benefit from RAW, I just press this, I take in RAW, and I press it again, and I'm back to JPEG. I would say on average from a family shoot, maybe out of say 600 pictures, I would say I maybe shoot between 5 and 10 in RAW. Okay, another very important point is that JPEG is grossly underestimated. If we take this image, for example, we've got a washed out sky, and we've got a very dark foreground over here, very dark, all the plant life over here is all very dark. Now, in regards to bringing back the sky, we saw we had a problem with that with the last example that I brought, but there's a way around it that can make it look a little bit better than what we saw before. And I'm going to drop the exposure. Don't worry about the guy because I'm going to erase this part of the filter. I'm going to drop the highlights. Now we can see the sky really it's not really that good. However, if we come here and bring in a tint from Lightroom, now we can see we've got this gorgeous sky come back. Now all I need to do now is just erase. I'm not going to do this so carefully. We just need to erase the part of the filter that fell on the boy. Now in regards to bringing back all this foliage at the bottom, let's put the exposure up and let's see what happens over here. See, there's actually quite a lot of information that we might think in JPEG we wouldn't have. Now I'm going to lift up the shadows a little bit, even better, and also we've got our clarity tool, one of my favorite things to use, which means we can actually bring back a huge amount of information. So if we look at the before and after, that was the original image shot in JPEG, and we're actually able to do a lot more with it than what people would think. The reason why JPEG is so underestimated is because so few people shoot in JPEG professionally that people aren't aware of how versatile a JPEG image can actually be. Another reason why I don't shoot in RAW is because my style of photography is suited to JPEG, and the system that I'm giving over to you guys is one that is built for JPEG shooting. We're constantly striving to find a background that is of a comparable exposure to the foreground. Also, the white balance rules that I've given you, although we said at the beginning that the white balance you're afforded a huge amount of leeway with the white balance, if you follow the rules of white balance that I gave over, the level of how far off you could be is going to be so minimal that to fix the JPEG is going to be completely acceptable, completely fine. So what do I recommend for you to do? My recommendation is for you to shoot in JPEG. The reason is because just like if you're able to drive a manual car, you're able to drive an automatic car. So too, if you're able to shoot in JPEG, you're going to be able to shoot in RAW. And if you're careful to try your best to get the correct exposures, to adhere to the rules that we learned about white balance, and to stay consistent in your white balance, then the extra exactingness that JPEG is going to give you, I think, is only going to help you. And then eventually you can move into RAW if you feel that that's something that you would like to do. Class 6, Chapter 3, RAW and JPEG. RAW is the unprocessed file that weighs generally around 30 megabytes. The JPEG file weighs generally, it's the processed file that weighs generally around 3 to 6 megabytes. The advantages of RAW is that you have more dynamic range. You can pull out shadow, you can open up shadows, pull out highlights, and the white balance also you have a lot more leeway. The advantages of JPEG: are the backup. If you have 2 card slots, it makes backup extremely simple. Storage as well, it affords you more room for storage. The buffer on your camera means that you can take more pictures continuously without the camera freezing up. You can also, many cameras, choose to shoot RAW occasionally by pressing a button to flick into RAW for a moment. If you use flash, that also reduces the advantages of RAW. And to remember that JPEG is underestimated. There's a lot more you can do than generally people think. Bear in mind, 90% of professional photographers shoot in RAW, and if you really want to get into like fancy editing, very high-end editing, then RAW is definitely going to be the right option for you. My advice is shoot in JPEG, and just like if you know how to drive a manual car, you know how to drive an automatic car, it will hold you in good stead.